Welcome to episode 25 of the Necronomicon.com. Roald Dahl is an author who wrote some of my favorite books, including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, and one of my favorite short stories, Lamb to the Slaughter. In 1943, Dahl published a book about a group of pesky little creatures living in a northern English forest. They were called Gremlins. The Gremlins were living a great life until one day the humans showed up with big trucks and machinery, and they cut down all the trees and they rolled over the earth and flattened it. They built factories that churned out airplanes, and in the process, they destroyed the homes belonging to the Gremlins. The Gremlins vowed revenge and began sabotaging the planes of the humans, proving almost as big of an enemy to the RAF pilots as the Germans were. But one pilot, who went by the name Jamface, found that if you fed the Gremlins transatlantic postage stamps, they befriended you. His buddy Gus tried this, but it didn't work, and his plane was shot down. The next time Gus went up with his Gremlins, they caused so many problems, he got shot down again, but this time took 2 bullets to the legs, effectively ending his career with the Royal Air Force. Laying around, no longer able to do what he loved, Gus came to the conclusion that he could train the Gremlins instead, and he started a school for them and taught them to be good. And most of the Gremlins loved being good, to the point that they helped Gus pass his flying test, even though he could no longer fly on his own. Walt Disney enjoyed this story so much that he flew Roald Dahl out to Hollywood to discuss making it into a feature film. But that never happened. A little over 40 years later, we were finally given a Gremlins movie. And as much as I love Roald Dahl, I'm really glad that's not the movie that we got. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And I think at some point, Corey Feldman poured water on me because now I have 4 kids.
And I am Don Guillory, historian, author, educator, and co-host of this podcast as well. And this movie definitely kept me from getting any strange pets when I was a kid.
So joining us today is author Edward Savio. Edward did the Beetlejuice episode with us a while back, so some of you may know him already. If you don't, check him out. Go check out his stuff. It's fantastic. Edward, tell us what you've been working on.
Hey, how are you guys? I have been diligently writing the 3rd book in a 4-book series called The Battle for Forever is the book series. The first one was Alexander X. We hit number 1 on Audible, all of Audible, and actually made the AP. We came in at number 6 in the top 10 for AP bestsellers for the week in November. Like 6 months after it came out, we did well in the beginning, but we also did well later on. So I've been doing that, and actually, if you search my name on Google, Edward Savio, you will see that. Down at the bottom where they have the related searches, it's Edward Savio, Book 3 release date, Edward Savio, Book 3, Edward Savio, when is Book 3? And so no pressure or anything, but that's literally what's like every time someone searches, they send me these pictures of it and they just go, are you writing? And if I post anything, by the way, on Twitter, I will always get at least one person going, stop posting, you should be writing.
Oh, no, that's all I see on your Twitter. It's always people asking you about the next book or people tweeting your name and putting, loving this, wish book 3 was out.
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, as we were scheduling this, James has been always saying, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. It's just I'm so locked in writing right now. It's been fun. So I'm glad we got a moment to do this.
Feel free to send me your hate tweets for taking up his time. And yeah.
Seven with me, I won't care. So
exactly. But Don, we were talking about this before. Gremlins is one of those movies, though, that is iconic in so many ways. And, there's so many things in this that there's a lot to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start with the obvious. Everybody talks about the rules. Anyone that I've ever talked Gremlins with immediately goes, well, how long after midnight? Which time zone?
Right. Is it Beijing time, Eastern time, Pacific time, Mountain?
Yeah, does it just adjust? Is like Gizmo made by Amazon and the time just sets to wherever he is? But so let's
he has to get acclimated, man.
He has to get acclimated. Good Lord. No, so when I was a kid and I saw these rules the very first time, even then, that was my question. Like, I don't know if I was just an asshole already or like, if it's just that obvious, but when after midnight? And I find that even today to be a very interesting question because I've never found an answer online. There's actually an answer to the water question, which I'll get to in a minute, from the original scriptwriters, but there's nothing about this time, and I find that just great because it's so weird. It's such a strange rule, but so
it is literally a movie rule. It's like one of those things like, okay, I mean, like same thing, Cinderella. Like, what's the point, right? It's very Cinderella-esque, right? Which is, you're going to turn back into a pumpkin after midnight. Well, okay. All right. Usually it'd be after the bar closes, I would think, like 2 a.m. That would be my choice. But okay, midnight. Got it. All right. So, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I think that midnight's just one of those things we like, oh, after midnight. For me, that's like, I'm still in work hours. But for some people, that's like, especially, when we started telling tales, we were so after dark. Midnight was like, ooh, scary. Now we have lights.
Yep. Well, and like my overall issue with the rules is if they would have just told him why, he would have paid more attention to the rules.
Right.
But the thing that gets me about this midnight feeding rule is that for some reason, this kid that tells him the rules thinks that's the important one. Direct sunlight fucking kills them. Mm-hmm. But he's like, oh, but hey, don't feed them after midnight. That's the worst one.
Right.
I find that great.
Because, well, they only get bad when they get wet.
If they get wet, they multiply.
They multiply.
If they eat after midnight, they
get bad.
Turn evil. They
turn evil, right. So, I mean, that's pretty, I guess for humans, that is the number one thing, right? Because they're going to kill you if it's after midnight.
Right.
So I understand how that might be number one. But I might mention the whole thing about daylight as well, a bit more effusively.
So and then we have the don't get them wet. So the thing with don't get them wet that I found interesting was online. I found an interview with the original scriptwriter Christopher Columbus and some of the different things that he was thinking at the time. And the rule was actually that they could use water that was 29 degrees or colder, which, as you know, that's called
that's
ice.
The fucking snow.
And we'll get to snow because that's my big fucking problem with this movie.
Exactly.
But don't get them wet. But hey, let's go play in the snow. But
dry water.
No, like I'm like so you can use ice on them, but this makes no sense because the ice would make their fur wet and it would warm up and it'd be above 32 degrees and they'd multiply. So the 29 degrees is a weird rule as well.
Wait, here's where I got to stop you on this though.
Yeah.
If they've eaten after midnight, you have Stripe and the other bad gremlins, right? Do they then go from being mammals or mammal-like creatures into becoming reptiles because they have scales and all this other reptilian appearance to them? So by that, they wouldn't necessarily warm up the snow and ice above 29 degrees.
Ooh.
I mean, and also there's no fur to attach it to.
That's
True.
fantastic. I think a
True.
better
There goes
rule
your
would
theory.
be don't let Corey Feldman near these. I think that would be a way better rule.
Yeah. I think that's a good rule for everyone. Don't
Yes.
let Corey Feldman near anything of yours.
But
Really?
so I was rewatching this today, and it struck me that the reason that the rules are so weird is because you have this kid who's telling the rules to an old man who's not really listening to him, right?
Right.
So it's not like the stereotypical older Asian man, which we'll definitely get to in a minute.
Yeah.
It's not like he passed on the rules. I feel like he would be like, this requires a great deal of responsibility. Like he said, sunlight can directly kill them. You don't want any of that. This is what would happen with water. But no, he's not involved. It's this kid who's so out of touch with the responsibility level that he's literally selling what becomes Gizmo in a back alley for a little bit of money against his grandfather's wishes. And then you have the dad who hasn't been listening to anybody this whole time. So the rules are passed on to somebody who's not even listening. And that's where it all goes to shit. And I had never noticed that until today, but I think it's a great explanation for why the rules are such a mess.
I also think one of the interesting things about this also is that it's almost a movie out of time in some ways. Like the look of it in the beginning is almost out of a 1940s noirish movie. Like you see the sailor in the beginning. It's almost it's like they reused the Shanghai sets from the Temple of Doom,
Right.
And the dad is selling stuff to a Chinese man that would be made in China. Like it's like this guy's probably seen this before. I always think, and you like you said, that old Chinese man, like we would never have that today. We would just not have that today.
People would lose their fucking minds if that was in a movie today.
And rightfully so, but it's like that back alley thing is just so bizarre. There's lines all over this where you're like, wow, and my little sidebar here is the rockin' Ricky Rialto in the indie billboard where he whips out the oldies. I'm just like, all right, there you go. We were all wanted to be India back at that time, 1985.
So let's talk about Mr. Wing, the older Asian gentleman.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Like this guy,
the Chinaman, quote unquote,
sure,
as which is what you're like. What?
I bought it from a Chinaman.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
This guy looks like something out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon that they wouldn't show anymore. Come to life. And
haven't we seen him play that same role like in Kung Fu? Wasn't he the guy in Kung Fu?
I don't know. Was he?
I had pulled the cast up, but yeah, I've seen him in a few other things. Where are you, sir? Yeah, real name is Key Luke. But he's been in a lot of stuff. He was in Charlie Chan at the Monte Carlo. A lot of those old, and that might have been it as far as like paying homage to the films that he had been in, the Charlie Chan movies.
Yep.
But what else was he in?
Yeah, because there's lots of homages in this movie.
Yeah, he was Master Po in Kung Fu the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think he was Master Po in the TV series. It's also like you look at this, like the last third of this movie is nothing but stolen tropes from movies. It's nothing but stolen tropes. Like, we'll get into that, but it's funny. So go on, James.
No, I was just thinking, like, it's so weird to me how this stereotype permeated society as well. Like,
right.
I know so many people that if they walked into a store like that, that's the guy they expect to be there because that's what they're really like. And I find that in and of itself amazing looking back at it. But all of my friends, like I remember like having conversations about different stuff, and they would like describe these Chinamen, as we just called them, this way. And I think that that's so weird how Hollywood has this ability to put images in our head of how things are, even though they're not.
That's right.
And that's all I really wanted to say about that.
And I'll tell you, as somebody who's been to China, it ain't fucking like that.
No.
It's not like that at all. But yeah, that was, I mean, James brings up a good point, because especially in the 80s, coming off the 1970s where he was in Kung Fu, and you had, of course, all the I guess the love affair with the exoticness of Asia with respect to the martial arts and you know, medicine and clothing and things like that. That trope and that generalization stayed through to where you have movies like this, because even in what was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, there's that whole scene with the Chinese triads where, you know, the way that they're going to get Indiana Jones is they're going to give him the poison and then make him, you know, come up with some bargain or barter to actually get the antidote, because they're such shifty people, can't be trusted. You know, and all the other craziness that ensues with this love with Jade, and even kind of the subdued xenophobia that was in that film, where of course they're trying to get the blonde white woman. And it goes back to, you know, 1930s and 1940s movies where you had the Asian character or the Asian character played by a white actor who's, you know, lusting after a white woman or a white European woman, and he's going to do whatever he can to get her and keep her away from, you know, whatever white male protagonist that there is, because, you know, even from the 19th century, there was that idea of the opium dens, and you got to make sure that you keep your to quote some of the documents I've read, you have to keep your pure women or your chaste daughters and sisters away from these Chinamen, because they'll get them hooked on opium. Right.
Yeah, but you know, I agree, and I think there's so many things, especially with, well, let's not even get into the opium wars, but what's interesting is that I didn't feel like I can watch Indiana Jones and not feel super uncomfortable. Right. I go, you know, yeah, I feel like it's a bit on the nose and stereotypical, but it didn't feel like this movie felt uncomfortable at times. And, you know, and I know they got that character that's like, goddamn foreign cars, you know, and
yeah.
And, you know, he's a total xenophobe. And one of my other favorite parts of this is that, you know, he gets out, you know, Billy, played by Zach Galligan, he gets out of his house and he tries to, is it his car? His car is the VW, I think.
Yes,
right?
He's got a Volkswagen Beetle.
Volkswagen. And the Volkswagen is steaming, right, as he tries to start it up. Now, anybody who's ever owned a Volkswagen Beetle of that era knows that there is no water in the car. It's an air-cooled engine. So no water. It would be perfect for Gremlins.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because, you know, so no water equals no steam. But, you know, the set guys were like, the director's like, we need steam. We need some steam here. So, I mean, it's like even stuff like that where you're like, okay, they're doing all of these classic things. Kid gets in car, tries to start it up. Of course, there's smoke, you know, and steam coming out of it, even when there is no water in the car. Also, did you guys notice like the sets, not the set, but the back lot? Did you notice it was all the same stuff from Back to the Future, which has been used for Kill a Mockingbird. But I mean, they were, you know, he's literally running down the same Marty McFly street, you know, and the custom flocking, by the way, on the trees is really so Hollywood. It looks so real. I don't know if you've ever. Did you ever live in LA?
No, I haven't.
No.
It just the first time I'd ever seen custom flocking, like colored like snow on a tree. It was just, you know, I just felt so LA. But what were you saying? Back to the Future.
Back to the Future is like my almighty film. Like I feel about it the way the crazy fanboys feel about Star Wars, like
Right.
So for me,
I
it's
agree.
like overly obvious that that's where he is, especially when you see like the theater and stuff like that.
Theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I mean,
definitely.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that whole thing. And I think it had been used like so many times in Music Man and all these other movies. But I think Back to the Future, because it used it so iconically and so often, it kind of it became like you couldn't use that anymore. Like you couldn't use it in a movie because it became too well known.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think this came out like the year before.
It did, yeah. This came out in 84 and
Right.
Back to the Future came out in 85.
Right, 85, right. Yeah. So, yeah, after that, it was it like I watched it and I was like, Back to the Future. I feel the same way about Back to the Future, by the way. I do.
Nice. We'll do an episode on that sometime.
We'll do an episode.
Oh,
told
man,
you,
that'd be a
James, it's
crazy
horror
fucking
movie.
episode.
You got mad when I said it. Like, it's a horror movie.
Anyway.
All right, so
Especially
also
part two.
also, I don't know what California was like, but I think in 1982, 83 or whatever, we started all changing drinking ages to 21. But they were 18 when I was 18. And then when I was 19, it became 19. And when I was 20, it became 20. When I was 21, it became 21 in Connecticut. And but I feel like Billy and Kate, the characters, the lead two characters, are working. She's working at a bar, and he's drinking at the bar, but they act like high school kids.
Oh man,
it's a weird feel. Like it feels like they're young, but she's supposed to be this hardened person with the fucking most cutest face ever, right? She's just such a hard driven, cynical person, working at the bar. And I thought that was an interesting, casting choice.
And then you have the fact that Billy, like, he works at the bank, right?
Yep.
Right.
So he has to be a certain age to do that. You can't just, like, 15-year-olds don't get to go work at the bank for obvious reasons,
Right.
But then his best friend is like this 11-year-old Corey Feldman kid. Why are you hanging out with this kid? Why don't you have friends your own age?
Right.
And then you have Phoebe Cates' character, and she has this great tragic backstory with her dad, which we'll definitely get to because it's my favorite part of the film.
Exactly.
But so I kind of wonder, like, is she so messed up from losing her dad that she just like latched onto the first guy that liked her, even though he's this weird dude that hangs out with an 11-year-old boy? I don't know. So
well, he's a star of a movie, so that's pretty much it. I think that's what he's got going for him.
I would like to know the backstory between those two, Pete and oh gosh, what was Zach Galligan's character?
Billy.
Billy. Jeez, yeah. Should have just gone with the generic stuff. Yeah, that would be an interesting backstory. Maybe he helped him, fend off some bullies or something a few years prior. Something interesting would have had to have connected those two, or maybe their parents were friends at one point.
I think Corey Feldman's probably his weed.
I don't know.
I think he's his weed delivery boy. I think I don't know. He just feels like he's always doing something wrong.
You know what? That wouldn't be too unreasonable to believe.
No.
And if nothing else, it was probably true in real life.
In real life, yeah, probably. Oh yeah.
Billy, I got some great ganja for you.
Yeah, I would love to know though. Like, did Corey Feldman just like he had to appear in another movie for his contract? So they were like, "Fuck it, just cast Feldman." And they were like, "No, that doesn't make sense. Like, he's not old enough." And they're like, "Man, no one will notice. Who cares?"
Didn't Christopher Columbus do Goonies? He did Goonies, right?
I believe
He was the writer, at least. He might have even. I know he was not the director, but I think he was the writer of Goonies. So apparently, he just writes the Feldman character really well. I also thought it was interesting that It's a Wonderful Life was on television, and Judge Reinhold and the evil woman bank person. They're basically the Mr. Potters of this story, you know, and it sets it up in a lot of ways, very much like this is that idyllic New England town with these bad people, which, by the way, you know, Judge Reinhold there's never a payoff for his bad character. Like, you know, there's a payoff for the woman, right? The old woman.
Payoff.
Great payoff. One of the classics, probably the reason why that thing made it. You know, it was it was a trailer moment, but they never paid off Judge Reinhold. But you know, I'm going to throw something out here. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, this is a pretty timely, hopefully right now. My belief is Gizmo is the original Baby Yoda.
Oh, man.
You're going to start something right now, and people are going to be like, well, we haven't seen Baby Yoda get wet.
First they insulted fanboys, now they're bringing up Baby Yoda.
I'm not going to disagree because it was that same cuteness factor where you started getting the toys. You had, you know, even the cross merchandising where, you know, the little boys would steal their sister's Barbie car, Barbie mobile, whatever the hell it was, and put Gizmo in. I remember the T-shirts and all that other stuff that went, and it was just one movie that then, for some reason, we had to make a really shitty sequel to it, where it seems like somebody was, to borrow a phrase from somebody was having a cocaine-fueled ideas about what to make as part of the sequel.
Go check out the BS Movies podcast where they talk about cocaine-fueled movies all the time.
That's Corey Feldman again. He can help you out if you need him.
Oh man!
So there goes my chance of ever dealing with any of that.
No,
you know,
man. There was so much marketing with this film as far as toys and T-shirts and stuff, like Don was just saying. Like, I think I had merch before I saw the film. You know, like I really do. I think I remember having a coloring book and a puzzle and like a bunch of other stuff. And I'm not even sure I'd seen the film yet. It was crazy just that big.
You had all that marketing, which, you know, The Mandalorian is not a kid's show. I mean, it's a Star Wars TV series. Gremlins wasn't a fucking kid's movie. That's what made it so odd. So that's a great comparison to make between those two, because, you know, even watching this as an adult, I don't remember the same way as when I saw it as a kid, where some movies you can remember, oh yeah, this happened, oh, this is still funny, this doesn't work. And then you start to see the stuff kind of like with a lot of Warner Brothers cartoons or MGM cartoons, where you see it as an adult and you're like, holy shit, that was a dirty joke that they threw in.
Right.
I would have never gotten it as a kid. Wow, that was, you know, like even the flasher. You didn't realize how inappropriate the flashing gremlin was, because you're thinking like, just open it up as Jack. There's nothing there. Like what, you know?
Yeah, you're like, dude, you're flashing what? You know? And it was interesting because I think you're right. It was not, so it's not a kid's movie. It's not a Christmas movie. Right. Even though it's a Christmas movie. It's not a comedy. It's not really, I mean, it's kind of a horror film.
Kind of, right? Yeah, but still no.
Still no. I mean, but there's so many things that like that it's, to me, like looking back at it now, it is a movie that is so iconic, and I'm going to say something that I think is probably, I think it's true and also sad, which is no one would make this movie today. Like they wouldn't, this movie might get made for Netflix.
Right.
But this would never get put into a movie theater the way that was. You know, it's just too, I don't know. I mean, it's not there yet. It's very much like it almost feels like a studio. Remember when the studios controlled movies? It's like, I've got to put this kid in it. I've got this writer. I've got this set to use. We're using this set for Back to the Future next year, but we got a whole 3 months where no one's using this set. And we need something with snow. By the way,
get Phoebe Cates because she's hot.
Oh, she's so hot, and just but here's another thing. It's like, this is again a bad use of talent.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a good use of talent is to have Phoebe Cates, who actually is a good actress, getting out of a pool wet. Okay. But being hidden underneath all of those clothes, really, and I'm sure there's lots of, Zach Galligan fans who felt that way, females who felt that way about him too. He should have been on a beach somewhere. It would have been much better if this was Gremlins, Hawaii. Right.
Oh, man. Are we going back to Beetlejuice references here?
Yeah. I think almost, by the way, in general, especially in the beginning of my career, and I still do this today, I write about places I want to be able to get on a plane and go to so I can do research and write off. So, if I could put something in a tropical beach rather than the North Pole, I will absolutely 100% do that.
That's a great rule for writing right there.
It really is.
Hey, James has figured out my travel. He's like, "Why are you going?" I was like, "I got to do something."
Exactly.
So I want to go back to something Don said, where he said it was a terrible sequel. Number one, I would argue that the sequel is a lot of fun, and I think that that's what's great about Gremlins overall. Like, as insane as all of this is, the movies are so much fun that we're okay with it.
Right.
But I want to go back to Joe Dante was asked why he made the sequel the way he did. And I looked up this quote because I love it so much and I wanted to get it exact. He said, "When I was asked to do the sequel, which I originally turned down because it was so hard to make the first one, the only reason I decided to make the sequel was because years later, they had tried to make a sequel and couldn't figure out how to do it. And they really, really wanted another one. So they said to me, if you give us a couple cans of films with Gremlins in them next summer, you can do whatever you want. And they gave me 3 times the money that they had to make the first one. So I made Gremlins 2, which was essentially about how there didn't need to be a sequel to Gremlins." I love the last part of that. That's so great. But yeah, so I really think that it's about how fun they are. What do you guys think? Do you think that that's fair?
I think that if you take a look at all the tropes that they use, like they've got the science movies, they've got Alien had just come out, right? They use the pods that look like Alien. They've got, in the last, sequence of events, there's moments where all of a sudden the music changes and one of the guys is smoking a cigarette. He's got a trench coat on. He's doing the Maltese Falcon, right? Mm-hmm. They are just taking trope after trope. Actually, not even trope. They're taking movie after movie after movie and giving them a little, cameo inside of this. Everything from Close Encounters tones to, the moment when we pan across that shelf in the toy store where we see E.T., the E.T. doll.
Yeah.
In that same face, that he did. And then all of a sudden it was one of the Gremlins. I think it was Spike, probably, or Stripe. I think it was. But he comes out in that same moment. So they're just stealing all of these things that we know that tickle the back of our head. And they're kind of making fun of it. So in some ways, to me, this is actually a parody movie of other movies. It's a parody. It's taken all the things that we've done and we're going to put it with these, as Don said, which was, I never thought about that before, which we take these mammals and turn them into lizards, into reptiles. But we're just going to put these people in these scenes, even so much as to have these guys, these Gremlins sitting around a table playing poker, like, those old dog paintings where the dogs are playing poker, right? Everything, I just felt like it was tickling things that we knew.
It's kind of like that song Uptown Funk.
Yeah.
I believe that they just put all these lines that people would enjoy saying. And even though the song makes absolutely no sense, it's a gigantic hit. Everybody loves it. Like, kind of the same thing, you know, all these random things thrown into Gremlins. So it doesn't make logical sense, but hey, it's great. Everyone loves it.
Who did this? Did Universal do this? Universal,
well, I don't know.
Right?
Let's see. I forgot who the production was for this. It was either Universal or Warner Brothers. I think it was
Warner Brothers.
It's Warner Brothers?
It was Spielberg. So.
Well, Universal, because Spielberg was at Warner. Was that
Warner Brothers and Amblin did it. So,
right. But he was on a lot at Universal, so they did a lot of his Amblin Entertainment. The bungalow was on Universal, so they used a lot of the Universal set and all that, and they used everything. They used Paramount Pictures, they used Warner Brothers Pictures, and Columbia Pictures. It was really interesting how they just took all of these things, and I think, James, what you were saying is they took the greatest hits of these moments or iconic images and then just dropped them in here and said, let's make fun of this. And we've seen that later in like the horror films that I think do that. And I think your book even is actually like that, where you kind of take tropes from or moments or ideas like little homages to horror films and then make something different out of it, right? Which is what we all do with creativity. But I think it's
absolutely.
It's a fun thing.
You know, when you said that it's a parody, I started thinking about how the sequel is openly a parody. It makes fun of other sequels, right? And I was just, when I was looking up who the production company was just now, I was reading about how, unlike the second, which is a parody making fun of sequels, this was a black comedy. And I'm like, I think Edward's onto something here. I think they were both parodies and people just didn't get it. Or we didn't, not necessarily not get it, but we didn't put it in those terms, you know?
And I think part of it is that it was so, I think it's because at the time these things were so ingrained in our heads that we didn't even notice them. But now when we look back at them, there's some things that are like, oh, we don't do that anymore, or that's really from that time period. And so it's a little more obvious. I think, first of all, by the way, I just need to say that Billy's mom is a fucking terror. She is literally, I mean, honestly, like, get Navy SEALs. I want her. Like, I want her to be on my team. If I'm attacking anybody, or I've got to defend the Alamo, I need her. Forget, Davy Crockett. I mean, she's just she uses everything. She uses every tool at her disposal. I love it. And by the way, why is the high school teacher at the school at 2:30 a.m.? The science teacher.
Isn't it even weirder? I think it's his middle school teacher, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a middle school science teacher.
Middle
it's
school
weird because he's got all the, at least this free time to do this, or at least using the time to do this.
Right.
And it's, almost like a mad scientist while being a mad scientist. There's this great scientific discovery. Let me see what I can do with this thing that hasn't been mapped before. Oh, what can I do? Oh, you hungry, little buddy? Just all these things where he's using scientific rationale, but then all of a sudden he forgets the role of a scientist in an experiment, which is, your subject should remain your subject and study it, not, hey, let me just go ahead and interact with you and see what's going on here.
Yeah. We're not sitting there going, hey, little rats, let's come on out. Let's take a walk, okay? Let's do something.
Billy really just surrounds himself with people who make bad decisions.
Really bad decisions from start to finish. By the way, Gremlins also equal tribbles.
Oh, yeah.
Gremlins are tribbles on acid. I mean, They are just
From Corey Feldman.
From Corey Feldman. We're going to get some information from the locals.
Which is sad because I love Corey Feldman, and now he's going to hate me if he ever hears this.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you gotta love it. I mean, he's played that character like that, so you got to just go with it. But I thought that's another one of those things where they were like, I'm just gonna kind of check out. I'm like, what could we do if tribbles, were monsters? And I think they were just smoking something while watching that Star Trek episode.
Chris Columbus has talked about how they were based on mice in his apartment. And he said, like, during the day, they weren't so scary, but at night, it sounded like there was like a whole platoon of them. And I'm just like, where the fuck did you live?
Yeah.
Man, I had a mouse in my apartment once, and I didn't come home for 3 days.
So the mouse won.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I admitted defeat and left.
When I was at school in Washington, D.C., same thing. I lived in the Northeast, and we have, people sometimes have cockroaches somewhere. I'd never had them in my house, but in the cities they have them, and that we have other stuff in the suburbs. But the cats. I remember the cats being the size of small dogs, and the cockroaches, like I'd come into the room and you open up a drawer to put something in, this is when I first moved in, and the cockroaches normally would scatter, and these were just like, yeah. So what are you, you're the new guy? This is my drawer. Yeah. Take the one below. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, I think that's, no one's done a horror film about cockroaches, have they?
Creep Show.
Comedies like
Creep Show.
That was just a bunch of different bugs, though, because it wasn't just the cockroaches. Because you had millipedes, but Joe's apartment was, it was a comedy.
Yeah, right. Remember Joe's apartment? Yeah, that's good.
But that would be something very creepy to have, because anybody who's had to deal with an infestation like that. It's not fun.
No.
And you definitely don't want, you're afraid of everything that you could touch, have dealt with these cockroaches, or they're in your, you feel something on you when nothing's on you.
Yep.
And that was like the weirdest thing when I was living in Georgia, because it didn't matter what you did. Every house had something. And I just remember seeing one day, and I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I sprayed all around the house when I was a kid, just to, get rid of whatever might've been there. And I just felt like anytime I felt like something was on me, I just felt like, oh my God, there's a bug that's crawling on me, or it makes you paranoid.
Well, the South, because, the humidity. So first of all, they get bigger, all these insects. And second, the humidity causes you to sweat, which causes your skin to tingle, which makes you think something's on you, which then goes into the fear. Every time I'm in a place like that, I'm just like, I'm sorry that we had a drought here, in California, but I was like really happy that there were just so many less bugs. And I know that's bad for our environment, but just, when you're walking around every day, it's more pleasurable.
Absolutely.
Of course, as we move toward the edge of, global climate catastrophe, we don't have to use as much bug spray. But so that's always good. So James, you were talking about that one thing with which is like the Kate. The Phoebe Cates, Kate character's backstory.
Yeah.
Which is really, like, I felt like that was a story looking for a place to be put into a movie.
Oh, absolutely. It actually almost didn't make the film. I believe it was Steven Spielberg fought really hard against it. And then and it still got in. What I find interesting, okay, number one, it's my favorite scene. I love this story, but of course the story is made for somebody like me, right? It's all about how Kate's dad was coming down the chimney dressed as Santa and got stuck and he dies in there, right? But what I love about this story is how it doesn't fit. This whole movie grinds to a fucking halt to tell this story. And she doesn't like bring him inside to tell the story. Oh no, she's like, hey, let's stay out here in the freezing cold while I tell you this terrible story. And I love that they've apparently known each other forever, but he doesn't know how her dad died until this moment. And
right. Especially dad died as Santa in a chimney is really kind of like, that's like number one. Like someone, like if someone went, her dad died in the chimney, dressed up as Santa, that would be the number one gossip around town.
Exactly. That's the thing I was going to say. Even if you never hung out with this girl, ever, you know how her dad died. Everyone in this town knows this. So this is such an unnecessary, weird ass story to tell here. And yet at the same time, it's such a great story. Like the way she tells it is just fantastic. And so this is further proof that this is not a kid's movie. You don't make a kid's movie about somebody dressed as Santa coming down the chimney. Like that forces you to say things you shouldn't say to children, you know? So
well, especially not the rotting corpse Santa. You know.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, that really takes it to another level, doesn't it?
And by the way, let's just all just get real about chimneys. You know, ever since, I don't know, 1932, the chimney at the top, folks, was 4 inches by 4 inches. Now, I don't know how your Santa looked in your mind, but I don't know of any Santa that could fit in a 4 by 4 inch, you know, square with rounded edges. And then, at the bottom, the fireplace opens up to a foot or 2 or 3 or whatever. But I know, reach up right now into your fireplace and feel that open flue. How much room is there? It's 4 inches wide. So, you got, so it was like, what is that? What's that guy? Stanley, that flat character, Flat Stanley.
Oh, Flat Stanley. Yeah.
Flat Stanley, right? Flat Stanley. I mean, that's it. So it's just like from the beginning, this is why in general, like I was always like, when you finally figure this out, you go, okay, if you're 12 years old and you still don't know about this,
right?
You're just not thinking. You're just not doing the math. Forget the whole thing about, daddy kissing Santa Claus or mommy kissing daddy. Well,
hey,
daddy.
Either
that's
way,
it's
2020. We're very
2020.
Open to
it's okay, daddy. It's not wrong if you want to kiss Santa Claus. We're okay with that. That's true.
But yeah, no.
I gotta disagree with you though, James.
Fucking weird. Yeah.
For me, it worked. For me, that story worked because for me, this movie was a dark movie for me. Even as a kid, I remember that story about her dad dying. I was like, oh shit, that sucks. Her dad died on Christmas. And of course, the asshole part of me as a kid was thinking, I wonder if she still got anything for Christmas.
Right.
But no, it worked for me because then, especially now watching it again as an adult, I see why she's kind of so distant and fucked up. Or I guess I shouldn't say she's screwed up, but just so distant and kind of standoffish in a lot of ways. And kind of willing to put up with certain things because, the worst possible thing that could happen to her so far has already happened, which is, the brutal or the violent death or a morbid experience with the violent death of a loved one, and something that's definitely going to make her not like Christmas anymore. Because I don't know how you could enjoy a holiday like that with such a traumatic experience. And then, of course, setting up this, at least a little bit more information about her. But yeah, you guys are right. That whole thing with this being a possibly small town, or at least the suburbs, odds are people know what happened in her house unless she had just moved to that area and she's only been there a couple of years. But it seems like she's lived in that area and they've known each other for a while. So why wouldn't people know about what happened to her dad, or
Isn't that weird?
at least know, at least some of the general issues that took place.
See, if Corey Feldman had been in that scene, it would have been okay because he was young enough to someone might not have told him, and then it would have worked. So we could have gotten Corey in there for another scene, and it would have been great. And he could have delivered something to them, and they could have probably. That's why she told it. It was cookies laced with something. I don't know.
I would really like a follow-up scene where the gremlins come down her chimney to attack her.
Oh, yeah, and find a shoe.
Or just anything like that had been up there. That would be fantastic.
The wedding ring, yeah.
The idea of something coming down her chimney would be so traumatic and awesome. Like, that would be a great moment. That would really kick up the horror aspects of this.
Completely. That's one of the things that was interesting, that at some point, right, the horror turned into this frenetic pace with the music even sounding like I this sounds wrong, but it sounds almost to me like the music on a carousel.
No, absolutely.
And it's just like it's a kaleidoscope, and when you're like that moment when you're circling around in the ceiling fan and the it's just, it felt like I don't know if they got nervous and didn't want to go full out with the horror. And it really became just, okay, we're going to do the comedy part of it. But it did feel like it shifted gears, because there were definitely parts that had tension in that. But the last third of the movie doesn't have tension to me. I mean, I don't know. Do you disagree or agree on that?
It seems like it's just going towards this eventual standoff that's going to take place, at least in the last 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
But when the Gremlins take over the town, that's when it's almost like it's like the Muppets. Right. At that point, because of all the comedy that they're pulling off, with the one gremlin who puts on a ski mask.
Right. Yeah.
He puts on a ski mask and pulls out a gun, to have at least attempt a robbery. And then all the gremlins that have joined in to watch Snow White at the movie theater.
God, I love that scene.
For that, I'm watching. I'm like, okay, well, this has gotten weird, but it's kind of cute, but it's weird and funny. And even at that point of the movie, I'm just thinking to myself, like, well, are the Gremlins actually bad?
I always come back to that. I kind of wonder if the Gremlins are also symbolic of toddlers, because, I mean, we've all had kids here. So my feeling here. They're destroying everything, but then they're like, yay, Snow White, and like throwing food and having a good time. Like, I don't know. That's my everyday in my house right now.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Well, to me, Gizmo, let's get real deep here. Gizmo, we're going to get biblical. Gizmo to me is the apple in Eden. Okay. Right? He is the apple. He's the piece of information, the knowledge, the thing that's given to this person, to man, and we're not ready for it. We can't handle it. And all of the other bad shit that happens in this is like a metaphor for that information that Gizmo is, we're just not ready. And even like at the end, the old man character even says something like that. You're not ready for, you weren't ready. I mean, it's pretty, man is not ready. Mm-hmm. And, but it is funny that it is about kids too, in that sense of that kids are terrors and nightmares, and only parents, like, you go through a store as a single person or a person without kids, and you look at other people with kids and you just go, I would never do that. And I would never let my kid do that. And you get kids and you're like letting them do all of the things because you understand that you could have a meltdown on a scale of 1 to 100 at a 70, or you could have the 99. and you're going to go for the 70 meltdown, right? You're every time you'll be like, okay, I'm just going to keep it at this level 70.
Oh, absolutely.
But also but there was like this one moment where the father thinks early on, he thinks, I could make money off of this.
Yeah.
You remember that? Like, he's like, okay, we could pour some water on them and we can sell them all over the country and this would be great. He is, by the way, the worst inventor ever. I mean,
I'm going to invent some stuff I just saw at the gas station.
The bathroom buddy. See,
it's a whole bunch of things that you already have, but now they're all in one place.
All in one place, in a really inconvenient block that wouldn't fit in your pocket.
I love that he says that it'll make traveling like less heavy. He's like, oh, your luggage will be less heavy now. And I'm like, no, it won't, because I have all that stuff. And now you're adding a fucking brick to it.
You're adding a brick that it's solid. Yeah, exactly.
And what happens when the toothbrush goes bad? Can I replace it, or do I have to get a whole new brick?
Yeah, completely. And I don't even know, where do I even put new toothpaste in? I have no idea. There were so many things wrong with the bathroom buddy.
Even what's wrong with his toothpaste? It squirts on his jacket and he just like wipes it off and it's gone. And I'm like, my toothpaste does not do that. I drop one little tiny piece of toothpaste, I got to change my whole outfit.
Yeah. 3 days from now. Yeah. Right. 2 washes from now, it's still in there. You're like, damn it. Yeah, I thought it was very, I don't know. I thought that I want to know, I want to know how they came up with the iconic, the old woman flying through the window. Like what was someone was in a house and was visiting their poor grandma. And
apparently she might not be too poor if they were thinking about throwing her out of a window.
Well, no, it's just like you're just there, and we're gonna help grandma bring her upstairs, put a key, and you're just sitting there waiting for her to go upstairs. You're going, if this thing just shorted out, she would fly through the air through that window.
I'm more worried that that's exactly what happened. Like, it shorted out and she went up fast, like not going out the window, but like I picture grandma's flying on up the stairs here.
Right.
And somebody's like, oh, hey, that'd be a great scene in my movie.
Right.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and say as the sick and depraved one. I know what was going through that guy's mind, which was, man, it'd be fucking awesome if grandma were to get catapulted across the yard. Because often, we often see those things, like in Scream when Rose McGowan's character gets killed which makes no sense, no sense in the laws of physics. She gets killed by the garage door because for some reason she's too light to stop the door from going up, or she's not heavy enough to stop the door from going up. But once it goes up all the way, it crashes back down from already crushing her. But yeah, it's one of those things that I'm sure you've thought about it. James thought about it. Well, at least James has thought about it because we've had these discussions about, like, what would happen if, these axe throwing displays, they didn't have things set right and the axe went over the guard and, ended up going 20 feet away and hit somebody in the head.
Or you pulled back too fast and they just shot behind you at your friends,
Because when I was a kid, I thought that's what would happen with those chairs. I mean, from this movie, that's what I thought would happen with these chairs. And every time I see it advertised, like early, because, I get up early because to take my daughter to school, and I see those commercials where it's like, the Easy Lift chair or the Ready Bath or, all these things that are there for senior citizens or for the disabled. And you just think of like all the ways that someone can die in it. It's just one of those things that, unfortunately, being around James too much and watching too many horror movies, that's what I think about now, which is what possible way could this lead to the destruction of someone? With that movie, that's all I've ever thought about whenever I see one of those chairs is that, mean old Biddy getting in the chair and, getting shot out the window. Which for me, as a kid and as an adult, I still laugh my ass off on that scene.
It is funny. And I also wonder, like, so the physics of it is interesting because, like, number one, like you'd have to have the window would have to be perfectly placed.
Yes.
You know, and it could only work, by the way, not in a window like they had. Like she would have kept rising, right? Because she's rising. So she would have kind of hit the corner of the ceiling. Like if you're kind of coming up and going up and up and up and up, she wouldn't have gone straight across, you know, because it doesn't really flatten out at the end. She would have gone. And I always thought it was like someone had kind of a cross between that dream and going, did we just see Top Gun? Did we just see Top Gun? And we need to get like, I mean, it's kind of like the horror version of, you know, grandma's strapped into the chair and we're going to eject. I mean,
That's
it
awesome.
just, you know.
No, she did that and she landed in Ice Man. No,
Ice Man. Oh. But okay,
You're such a maverick.
Such a maverick. So when we get to that, so back to that ice, right? So again, I had never thought of the water, the snow as water issue, which does bother me now.
That's my mission in life.
It does bother me now because literally, like, okay, like even say, you know, what you were saying, Don, which is that they're cold-blooded. They travel from outside to inside. So even if they brought in a couple of flakes, like, and how much water is too much water? Is a snowflake version, you know, a snowflake of water? Is it a drop of water? We know a drop actually does something because we saw it in the science, with the science teacher. But, you know, I mean, and if they're in a really humid place, is that bad too? I mean, you know, if you're going to Florida, just on a...
Well, do they sweat?
Right. Right. You know, yeah. I don't know. I mean, fog. San Francisco would be horrible for these people. Be all over the place. We would just be, you know, there'd be no room for humans here.
Well, Arizona wouldn't be much better for them because the direct sunlight is everywhere.
That's correct. Yeah. I always think that, you know, like you said, rules are important. Anybody who's writing, who's listening to this, your rules are the most important thing.
Yep.
And if you don't have those locked down and they're not logical, they can be, I guess they could be illogical as long as they're always consistent. It helps if they're logical, but, you know, there were some funny ones about this. I agree. Like I had the same thing when I wrote notes. I wrote, you know, midnight, Beijing time, Eastern time, Pacific or Mountain, you know, I didn't know which it was because they seem like they came from China. So it might be, you know, the middle of the day that they shouldn't eat. And is it a darkness thing? You know?
Well, here you throw in the at least the time and time zones and time awareness thing.
Right.
Okay. So you have to be, as somebody who owns one of these mogwais, you have to be someone who actually is aware of the time, because it's understood that they don't know that they're aware of the time. So you have to be aware of it to make sure that they don't do certain things. But it's real clear after the first batch of offspring for Gizmo, they are aware of time. Stripe is aware of time to the point where he unplugs the clock, which, you know, is great to look back at that old analog clock. Unplugs the clock, and then Billy's like, "Oh, well, you guys are hungry, so I guess I'll go downstairs and get some for you." Well, it's not midnight. Hey, Gizmo, you want something? And there's no point where Gizmo's like, no, don't feed any of us. It's just kind of like, no, I'm not hungry.
Yeah, right?
Right.
I'm good.
Right.
Gizmo
Well,
could have stopped all this. He could have been like, no.
Howie Mandel couldn't do that voice as well. He couldn't. Yeah.
Well, he did say bye, Billy, at the end. So
He did say bye.
Bye, Billy.
I thought that was interesting. The Michael Winslow from who did Spaceballs, the guy who did all those noises on Spaceballs, Frank Weller, who did Scooby-Doo, Peter Cullen, who was the voice of Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
They had a lot of voice talent there, which was really pretty cool. There were some others as well, but I didn't recognize the names myself. But yeah, it's like, you know, you don't even think about that, but Howie Mandel, like, you know, without saying a word, except for at the end, Gizmo has that personality. Same thing, I was just looking at, some of the Star Wars movies. Same thing with R2-D2. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I think actually
R2's got a whole personality somehow. It's fantastic.
Fantastic without words. And I think the BB-8, the new version, right, in the round ball one, in the newer movies, that was done by Bill Hader.
Really?
Yeah, he's one of the two actors who do the voices. So, I mean, so you're like, huh. By the way, I know this is a little offshoot, but did you see this, the two speeder bike guys?
Yes.
Talking about, in The Mandalorian, talking about the Baby Yoda scene. Oh, it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. My kids were like, I don't think I've ever seen anything in a canon-based Star Wars movie that had that much comedy packed into it.
It was a mix of comedy and horror for me, because that was the one time watching The Mandalorian where I cursed in front of my daughter.
Yeah,
and I was like, it's like, did those
when they hit
Yoda.
the baby? Oh, it was so inappropriate.
And my daughter, being my daughter, I think when she realized what they did, she's like, Daddy, they hit Baby Yoda. Something should happen to them. And I'm like, oh my God, I have a mafia hitman in my room. Like, something should happen to him. I'm like, all right, kid.
Oh man.
It's very funny. Very funny.
Hey, I want to go back to the very beginning here. We talked about this before we came on, and I don't want to forget to actually talk about it. So the very first scene, is it the very first scene? When he goes downstairs into the shop, whatever scene that is, towards the beginning.
Yeah.
This is what I call quintessential white people shit. And I know Don's gonna want to jump in here any second, but
no, I'm gonna do it when it's time.
All right. This guy goes, he's following this kid that he meets on the street who tells him to come to this shop. He goes down into the shop and he's like, what the fuck's all this crap? And he's like kind of digging through it, but he's not even doing it nicely. Like, he's not like picking things up nicely. He's like not quite throwing them, but he's just digging through crap, right? And then he tries to sell his little block of wood to the older gentleman. And you hear Gizmo talking in the background this whole time, making little noises. And he's finally like, what is that? And he doesn't wait for them. Like, he could just say, hey, what's making that noise? And wait for their response. But oh no, quintessential white people shit right here. He just starts going through their stuff. He walks over to the sound. He picks up the blanket and he's looking at Gizmo. And then what's his response? I'll take it. Like, you wouldn't assume that if it was their pet dog that you could just buy it.
Right,
Right. Like,
No price tag on that.
And then he throws down 100 because he picks the price, right? He doesn't even wait for them to give him a price. He's like, I'll give you $100 right now. And Mr. Wing's like, no. And then he's like, 200. And he's just straight trying to just take this for whatever price he wants. And this whole thing just bothers me so much because it's literally like the founding of America rolled into a Hollywood scene here, like shows up, takes a bunch of stuff, offers whatever he wants to pay for it, and then thinks everything's his. And when he doesn't get his way, the kid says, meet me outside and I'll take care of it. He doesn't say, no, kid, don't steal this from your grandfather. It's okay. No, he heads right outside to pay the kid and get this thing.
Here's my opposite theory to that one. Not necessarily, not discounting it.
Yeah.
I think Wing and the kid were in on it. It's like, hey, there's this white guy out here who's looking for something interesting. Grandpa, let's go on a vacation for a little bit. We can close the shop, and then when it's time, we'll go pick it back up. Because does he even know where the guy lives? Because that's what's so strange about this is at the end of the film, Wing shows up to come get Gizmo and it's kind of like, oh, yeah, you guys aren't ready. And then goes off with him. But it's not clear that he left any information, right? I don't remember him leaving like a card saying, hey, here's my address.
I think he might have when he said he's an inventor.
But even then, but it might have been the phone number. I don't think he had his address on there. That was what was weird to me. But anyway,
we used that old Chinaman magic that we've been taught about in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, that's one of those weird things one of those tropes that was there. I'm surprised he didn't like. Well, you know what? Even that there's kind of the appearance that he's smoking opium. At least he's smoking out of that strange pipe, so it possibly couldn't be tobacco. It has to. He's got to be doing opium again. That's why he doesn't want to give up his special thing. Is because he's drug addicted. He has no idea what he's doing. But no, part of me thinks that the kid knew what was going to happen and realizes, we may as well make a couple of $100 out of this. The guy's he's going to come back and want it. So let's go ahead and sell it to him, make some money. He'll learn his lesson, and then we don't have to give a refund.
I don't think so. I think Mr. Wing wouldn't do that. Plus, the kid's always like rolling his eyes and pissed off at his grandfather that he won't take the money. And he does it behind his back.
That's the con. That's the con, man.
But he's not doing it to the dad either. Like he's just reacting.
I'm telling you, that's the con.
But here's the kicker for me. It's called a mogwai, right?
Right.
And this goes back to when we did that episode on The Thing. And at the beginning of The Thing, the Norwegian guy shows up and he's yelling, "Kill that dog! There's a demon in it!" But we don't speak his language, so we don't know that this warning's there at the beginning, right?
Right.
They say mogwai repeatedly. Mogwai means demon.
Right.
If he was using full English and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's our demon," is this white dad gonna be like, "Oh wow, I gotta have a demon for my child"?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. So I'm going to split the difference between this. Okay. So I don't think that the older Chinese man is like, obviously the kid is out there to get business. He's out there to bring people in. So yes, he's part of that. Right. But I don't think the old man is okay with the selling of this animal, but here's where I get a little confused, which is, why does it take so long for them to come and get them? And by the way, I think the answer, Don, is that they know where they live because this has been on the news, right? So now we know where this town is. This town is, and so we can come to the town, and I'm going to then go find where the center of the problem is,
right? And
that's where they find him. So I think that's how they learn. But it seems to me like it would have been okay. So in any movie today, right, where we didn't just discard the Asian character after we used them, we would have probably seen the scene where the grandfather was really pissed,
right,
that the mogwai was sent away, or seen like, "You did well," if it was like
that would be kind of fun,
and then it's like, see, now we will see if they're as smart as they think they are, type of thing, right? That's what you would do today, right? You just wouldn't. They just left, because this is one of my things that when I look at older movies with my kids, one of the things that I notice is that we are such better audiences today. We're way more sophisticated. And even those movies that we go, these are the greats, and they were the greats. But like, I don't know if you've ever seen Citizen Kane, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Citizen Kane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at Citizen Kane, and even to this day, some of the most amazing shots you'll ever see. But when I've shown it to my kids, and when I even saw it at first, I was like, these are good shots, but I've seen this before. Well, this is 1939. No one's ever done this.
Right.
Right. So when we didn't need as much information in the past. We kind of bought into the MacGuffins. We bought into the rules without as much logic. We were okay with it. I'm really thankful, actually, that the Star Wars movies happened in the 70s, because I think if we had Star Wars come out in the 60s, we wouldn't. It would be like Star Trek, which is Star Trek is cool still, but the universe that these movies live in today doesn't look like the universe of the original movies. Whereas in Star Wars, our movies today still look like the original movie universe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think we had reached at least a maturity point where we were okay. But there were still a lot of movies, and Gremlins is one of them, Goonies is other movies, where they just didn't take as much time as they did with Star Wars, as they did with Indiana Jones, as they did with certain other movies that still hold up, you know, as if they were done today. We still love Goonies, we still love Gremlins, but we're having this conversation where we're like, yeah, what's that rule? Why is that there?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, what do you feel about that? Like in terms of the audience today and how they are?
You know, the thing
I think
I'll
we
add
would be a lot more critical of it. Yeah, definitely. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, James.
Oh, no. I only have like one sentence and then I'll let you take over. But the big thing to me is I don't think anybody expected to be able to watch things over and over and over the way that we can.
Right.
And I think that in and of itself, as well as the ability to stream things or pull them up whenever you want, makes a huge difference as well, because now we can just break shit down. All right, Don, go ahead.
Pausing. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Pause. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have websites that are dedicated to the mistakes or the inconsistencies that take place with the films, or even when this film came out in '84. I almost didn't see it because of something stupid I did as a kid, which was being curious about, you know, mechanics and you know, the way things worked. So I screwed up the car door. So when we got to the movie theater, screwed up the car door, and, you know, my dad couldn't close it. So he ended up missing Gremlins and drove that car back, holding the door while my mom and I, you know, stayed at the movie theater and watched the movie.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. I have no idea how I was able to still see the movie after doing something like that. One of those things where I just clicked the thing and apparently it wouldn't close. But when we saw this movie, you're not looking for all the, you know, the inconsistencies or or even the theories that don't make sense, or the plot lines in the film that don't make sense, or somebody else's thoughts about the film and why it works or why it doesn't work, or how we could make it, you know. And that's kind of the strength of the movie coming out when it did, as opposed to, and I hope the TV series does well. I hope they do something to where, one, they pay homage to the original film, but then also update it for now to where, you know, the rules themselves, there's a little bit more explanation about the rules, or we get a little bit more information about the origins of the Mogwai. You know, something to where our curiosity has kind of taken us within the last 36 years over this film. Like, what is something that hasn't been addressed for us that would make the story better? Not something that I need to have answered because, you know, it wasn't answered in the film, but something that's going to make the story better and more interesting for audiences, because that's what most movie audiences are looking for, or even fandoms. We're looking for something that's not only going to pique our interest, but keep our interest.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that when you're talking about this, I'm really curious. It's HBO, right? That's doing it.
Yes.
Is it HBO? Yeah.
And it's animated.
So that'll be. Yeah. So okay, that'll be interesting. I'm not really sure about that. Like,
they did Spawn, the animated series, and it was absolutely great. So I have high hopes, but
that was like 20 years ago too. So yeah, they've
right. Well, you know what? I guess I was going to ask you this, and this is again kind of tangential to this story exactly, but you know, since they're going to redo it, it kind of goes back to what I was saying just in the last sort of series of comments. Like, Star Wars and Harry Potter seem to me to be the type of stories that people do not want reboots. Right? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to see someone else's version of Star Wars. Like Star Trek, it's interesting. You know, there's all these kind of like reboots and things, and the worlds don't really match. You know, their storylines, and they kind of fit together, but they don't. And certainly the original sets don't look like the sets we're using today. But there are some types of movies, and I don't know. Probably, I mean, we'll see what happens with like Game of Thrones and how that, the sequels go, because they're going into the past. But there's some movies where we just don't want people to fuck with our vision of them. And I wonder what makes that. Is it just that it's such a full-fledged, thought-out world? I mean, like for instance, like what's a fandom that's big, where we've kind of changed things, where the story's changed?
Oh God. Not necessarily changing. I mean, you referenced Star Wars itself as far as people not being happy with the way things go or the way things are. I think James was right as far as bringing up Back to the Future earlier. I would love to see it, not necessarily a reboot, but something along the same lines as Back to the Future. And maybe a reboot is the only thing that would be able to make it possible. Because we've kind of attached ourselves to what took place within that universe of storytelling. I would love to see an updated version, because I teach a film as history course. And when we get to the 1950s and we talk about Back to the Future, I tell all my students, or at least when I was teaching it in person, I'm like, I want to let you guys know, time travel, the rules do not apply to black people. And what do you mean? It's like, black people aren't allowed to time travel. Like, what do you mean? It's like, do you know of any fucking time we would want to go back to? and at that point, they're kind of like, yeah, okay. So I would love to. And there was a TV series. It was short lived on NBC about some time travelers, and one of them was black. And I looked at it, was like, this show's not going to work. And my wife looked at me and was just like, what do you mean? I said, you've got a white male, a white female, and a black male. They can't go into the past together. And what was great is the one of James's favorite episodes for the new Doctor Who featured the doctor and her companions going to 1950s Birmingham, and they're all coming from Britain. And the one black cast member, one black companion, this woman drops something, it was a handkerchief or something. He picks it up and goes to hand it back to her, and her husband punches him in the face for trying to touch his wife. And, it's just one of those things where he sits there, it's like, what the hell just happened? And so they had this conversation for a while about like, yeah, we got to remember how we're supposed to act at this place. And there's certain things we can't do and certain things we can do. And so for a lot of viewers, I'm sure that didn't make sense to them at first, or at least hopefully did make some sense to them by the time the episode was over. But I think Back to the Future would be a good one to do, but I think it would be very hard to please the fans.
Like I said, I'm a huge fan, right? And as long as he didn't fuck with the originals, I would be fine. If it was even, like, you could even have Doc Brown back right now, right? And I'd be okay with it. But I want news stories. I don't even necessarily wanting it taking place in the same city, Yeah, it's like I know I'm in the minority on this, and I'm going to get probably some hate mail from somebody, but it's like the newest Ghostbusters so far, not Ghostbusters 3 coming out soon, but the female version, as it's called online, one of the nicer terms for it. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I loved that the graphics have gotten to the point where the ghosts looked amazing. But I liked that it was its own self-contained thing. It wasn't trying to rewrite the past totally. I could have done without the cameos, because to me, the cameos kind of pulled me out of that. Like, I want it to just be, I would have thought it was great if it was a franchise, like one of 270, or some shit like that, instead of what they did. but I liked that it was basically its own thing. And I think as long as he did that with Back to the Future, I'd be okay with it.
I mean, I agree. I just feel like, even the people that were in the future, where people get upset about Star Wars, I think, they're getting upset with how things are, but the world still hasn't changed, right? It still looks the same. The droids look the same. The costumes look the same. The cities look the same. Even in The Mandalorian, which, I mean, the music's different and all that, but everything else about that feels like Star Wars. And I wonder what it is, I guess. I don't know, maybe because that would be a goal, right? To write something that would be so that people would feel, to create something that was such an iconic piece. I don't know that we could, I mean, I think it has to be something that's original from a movie, because I think if it's from another source, like even Lord of the Rings, do you remember the Lord of the Rings stuff, the animated crap?
Oh, yeah.
Which was just like, I remember thinking, I think I need to be on LSD to see this. I'm in high school. I think I do. It was just so interesting. But, it didn't match my view of what that was.
Okay.
But so I think with Gremlins, I'm going to be curious to see how they take this. I got to imagine. Do you want? Can we do some prognosticating?
Please do.
All right. So you do think? All right. I think definitely is going to be darker, more horror, more gory.
Yes. Especially since it's animated.
And do you think comedy more or dark more?
I think it's going to be darker. I honestly don't think with HBO going with that film and then seeing how, at least the parody or the levels of parody that were reached in Gremlins 2 and how that didn't necessarily work for a lot of people. They're going to have to go with this as being more horror based. Of course, you're going to have elements of humor to it and elements of comedy. But I think with the experience that they've had, or at least the track record they had with other animated series, going darker, going the horror route is probably going to be the best bet.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the opposite direction.
Of course you will.
Of course, yeah. That's why I let you go first. But no, I think that Gremlins really loses something without the humor. And so I think it is going to be a sarcastic humor.
Okay.
And I think that the kills will be ridiculous, making them funny, but not pull you out of the show funny, but like enjoyable, stupid greatness. Or at least that's what I'm hoping for. So I don't think it's going to be a laugh a minute by any means, but I think that without humor, Gremlins isn't Gremlins.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to, for me, I think it's going to lean more towards dark. The humor component is going to be there. So for me, I'm saying 60-40.
Cool.
And what kind of animation are we going with? Are we going to go with, it's going to look like Toy Story realistic animation?
Exactly like The Lion King. No, I'm just kidding. Oh man,
the circle of really funny.
Man. No, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see.
Secrets of the Mogwai, that's the name of it.
Yes.
So that seems like they're going to get into the origins then.
Let's hope so.
At least from the
Secret
title,
number
that's what it sounds
1.
like.
What time midnight ends? Secret number 2.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if they're doing it in China, as far as if it's going to be Secrets of the Mogwai and it's going to be China, that would add another interesting component to it as well. Because would it actually be interacting with humans?
Well, I'll bet you if they are doing that, which would be great for, box office is huge, the Chinese box office. So I wonder if they have Chinese money. I wonder if they have Chinese money behind this in terms of like for production and stuff like that. Because if they actually do go back to the origin story, then it would be a diversity. It's going to be a diversity project. More, we're not going to be in the white America town. Certainly, we're going to be wherever we are. We're going to be in a more modern world. But even if we're going into the past, so it'll be interesting to see that. Huh. I have never actually, it's funny. I don't believe I've ever watched anything animated on HBO. I don't think I've watched any of the animated series, and I'm not quite sure.
What else was there?
Spawn's the only one I can think of off the top of my head that I've watched. So,
yeah, that'll be interesting. So this is coming in 2021. All right, we're good.
Yeah, I'm looking at the lineup that they have as far as all the animated stuff. I mean, of course, you have the kids stuff, but as far as the adult stuff, or at least the non-child specific or directed towards them, there's like the Ricky Gervais show, which I didn't watch. Of course, there was Spawn, and then there was most recently there was that show Animals, and I recall it. I'd never watched it, but I recall the show. It was a comedy show, but yeah, this would be interesting for them to go that route to, as far as having another animated feature or animated series for young adult and adult audiences as opposed to children.
Yeah, it's a weird. I mean, I think they're going. This is HBO now, so I think it's going to be pushing their streaming service. But it's an interesting choice to go animated with this, because it does seem like I don't know. I mean, I love Star Wars, but I never got into the Star Wars animated stuff. I just always like the real world. I want to see the world. I want to be in that world. There are definitely animated movies and television shows and ideas that started out that way, and I'm okay with. But I have trouble going back and forth. I don't know how you feel. Like, you know what I mean? Like
I just looked. Oh,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I just looked up the background for the show. It's going to be the 1920 Shanghai, China, and it's going to be about Wing, and
nice.
Mogwai. So it's going to be their origin story, and it looks as though there is what's the production company? Well, it's Warner Brothers, but I don't see as far as the other people that are attached to it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I said that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to definitely get to see, we're going to see a modern Asian character. That'll be interesting because he'll be a young guy. It'll be Crazy Rich Asians pour water on mammals that turn into reptiles. That was the original title, actually.
I mean, it'll also honestly be kind of interesting to see how they develop his character, because in order to get to the point that he would be at in the first Gremlins movie, like he must have learned a shitload along the way, right? So it's going to be fascinating to me, but we'll see. I don't have anything else. Do either of you?
I think that's it. I think we went pretty much. We went biblical. We went Baby Yoda. We did the whole thing.
We're covering every religion.
Everything.
Went over my favorite scene. We talked about the xenophobia, even with the neighbor. But yeah, I don't really have that much to say. It's just looking back at this film again. It is interesting to see how much has changed, but then almost how much has not. With respect to how society's representation, but then how many things haven't changed as well, because you still have at least the levels of xenophobia that get represented in this film from a couple of characters, or even the age versus youth, or at least youth versus elderly that comes up. You have class issues that come in as well. It's there are a lot of things that to delve into that don't even involve these little green monsters that are running around in this film, which is it's it's interesting for me because it doesn't matter whether you're a good person or a bad person. You might come in the crosshairs of the Gremlins, but even then, they shell out at certain points. Didn't they start smoking weed in this movie, or were they just smoking cigarettes?
I'm pretty sure it was just cigarettes.
Cigarettes, yeah.
Okay,
unless they got a hold of Corey Feldman's stash, but I don't know. So,
wait, or was it the second one where they were doing cocaine? I can't remember. There was.
I think someone might have done. They might have done cocaine in this.
Okay.
There's an image where somebody's snorting something. I don't know what it was.
Okay, then it was this movie then, because I start to mix the two together as far as like some of the antics that they got involved in, because you had the cross-dressing gremlins in this one and in the second one.
Well, you can't go without a Gremlins show without cross-dressing. I mean, I wouldn't want to see one if there wasn't any cross-dressing because that's really that's the whole reason to watch this. I think that what I found most interesting is that it felt so placed in that time period. We've talked about other movies, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, even Back to the Future. And even though Back to the Future has all these like clothing styles and choices that are very, very 80s, it doesn't feel like it's locked in as a movie. This feels like this movie could have only been made in, that early to mid 80s. And Goonies came out like a year later, and it had that same feel. It wasn't as dark, but it just had that same look. Even the Spielbergian high contrast between the light and dark scenes. I don't know. One of the things that I can't do anymore is I can't watch old movies. I mean, I do, of course, but I can't handle the moments where we use the day for night in old movies.
Oh,
Ever since, I don't know who was the first, but Spielberg's been really great at it. I remember the first time probably was E.T. when I saw nighttime for the first time, really, in a movie. So this feels like it's 1984, and very different from George Orwell's 1984, but it still has a little bit of that.
Is it though?
Is it? Well, what's really funny? Don was talking about that with the xenophobia, and I think the difference between now and then is that there's actually a lot of xenophobia in this country and in the world, and it's out in the open. And it's very, very straightforward, but it's not as casual. I think there are people that are not xenophobic that would be casually xenophobic in 1984.
Right.
I think it's a much more of a choice now. I think back then it was kind of like we were ignorant white people. I mean, we just
absolutely.
were. I mean, And I say that as like all majorities, like in different countries, because there's places in the world where other groups are the majority, and in Asia and Southeast Asia and all that, where they act the same way toward other groups.
Right.
But it just felt like so much more casual. And I don't know if you guys have read any books, from the great writers of the 60s and the 70s, and the amount of times they use the word N-word, and every time they use like all kinds of negative things, and they're just saying it, like they're just using it, like, and they're liberals, right? And you're just like, it's not comfortable, And I know that what they were trying to do, they were trying to make us uncomfortable using words, but it just this feels to me like it's locked in this time.
Right.
I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to wrap this up?
I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Cool. Well, we're going to be back later this week with a look at Parasite with BS Movie Podcast Shelley Grants. So in the meantime, I want to thank you, Edward, for coming on the show again. I had a fantastic time.
And I hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, you want to tell everybody again where they can find you online and get your books and all that good stuff?
Sure. If you just search my name, Edward Savio, Savio, just go through 3 or 4 pages of Google. But you can go to edwardsavio.com. You could find me on, I feel bad, by the way. There's a dentist in town, Edward Savio, and he just gets no love when people search for him. So you could check me out on Amazon and Audible and ask for me at the bookstores. Look for Alexander X. I actually have a book coming up. We don't know exactly when it's going to get dropped because I got to slip it in between 2 books. It's called The Velvet Sledgehammer. I am doing the audiobook as well. It is not safe for work. It is not for teenagers. It is not sci-fi. It is nothing that you should be listening to. You probably shouldn't even get it. But it's just, it's been called, Kirkus Reviews called it a cross between Sun Tzu's Art of War and Portnoy's Complaint. And if you don't know Portnoy's Complaint, it's a classic, just stream of consciousness, just vulgar, funny thing. So that's coming up. So, awesome. So again, just look for me. Thanks.
Fantastic. So we'll end it there. So thank you for joining us again on the Necronama.com. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we'll see you soon.